People not.
There we go.
There it is.
Okay, I asked John Van Scoyac, who's the alternate select board appointee to the committee, to run the meeting since he's going to be in town and I am out of town in Brooklyn, not Brookline, Brooklyn, New York.
LYN.
LYN, despite what Zoom says on the transcript. But anyway, until he comes in, he'll probably be about 5 minutes late. I'll run the meeting and then he can take over. Let's start off by saying that this is the meeting of the Expenditure and Revenue Committee for October 6, 2025. And let's start off with roll call. Tiffany, can you run that?
Sure. Bernard Green.
Yes, here.
Dick Benka is absent currently. Ruth Ellen Fitch.
I'm here.
Great. Jeff Rudolph is absent currently. Sergio Modigliani.
Yes.
Janet Gelbart.
Here.
Sadaf Kazmi is absent currently, but I do know that she will be joining shortly. Mariah Nobrega.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
Thank you.
John Doggett, I don't believe is here. John Van Scoyac is not here yet. Jesse Hefter, I don't believe is here. And Cliff Brown may or may not join, but is not currently here. But we do have a quorum.
Dick Benka just walked into the room.
Thank you.
John Van Scoyac.
Sure, John.
And John.
Hey, John.
What should I say? Right here.
Out the head.
Thanks.
Okay, John, you can take over now that you've.
It was so smooth.
Yes,
It's like we planned it, right?
yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bernard.
And
Okay, thank you.
Sadaf has also just joined.
Great.
And Dick Benka walked in.
Great.
I'm assuming Bernard explained that because he's remote, as the select board alternative on the committee, I'm chairing the meeting with a very light hand, and because most of the business is to be led by others. But at the start, I guess we have minutes to approve. I see 3 sets of minutes. Is there any change to the sets of minutes in terms of, are we doing all 3? Anybody want to chime in on that? Chaz, sorry,
We're good.
we're doing all 3?
Yep.
Does anyone have a comment on the minutes from 8/26, September 11th, or September 18th?
Or edits.
Yeah, comments or edits? No? Nope. In that case, shall we do all 3 or shall we take them one at a time?
You do all 3.
All right, so for all 3 of these minutes, August 26th, September 11th, and September 18th, going to just go through the roll call and starting with Bernard, actually starting with you.
Approved, yes.
And Dick Benka.
Yes.
Ruth Ellen Fitch, is she here?
Yep, she is, and I approve.
Thanks, Ruth Ellen.
Yep.
Jeff Rudolph,
Not here.
not here. Sergio,
Yes.
Janet Gelbart,
Yes.
Sadaf Kazmi.
Yes.
Is Mariah here?
I am abstain.
Abstain. John Doggett,
Not here.
not here. Myself, I'm an alternate, so I'm gonna not weigh in on this. Jesse Hefter,
Not here.
not here. Cliff Brown,
Not here.
also not here. Okay. So that gets us through the minutes, and we are at item number 3 on the agenda, which is going to be led by Chaz.
Well, I wanted to, you can see we have some guests with us today, 4 folks in the room, and some folks online as well. I want to give a warm welcome to our team from the Urban Politics Field Lab, from the Harvard Kennedy School. They are Bachelor's of Public Policy students who are doing work as part of a group of teams that are working in various municipalities in and around the Massachusetts area, tackling problems ranging from rodent control in Boston to the potential override and the financial situation here in Brookline. I want to give them a chance to go around and introduce themselves, just say briefly who you are and where you're from, and we'll your brief sentence about your background, and then we'll talk a little bit about the work and how you guys are already starting to help us out. So,
Yeah, I'll go first. My name is Ari Mesquita. I'm a second year in the program, originally from Brazil, but raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. Before HKS, I was a high school teacher. And then I also spent some time in Sacramento, California as a policy analyst, working on housing policy at the state level.
Great, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Thu. I'm currently a first year in the program. I'm originally from Seattle, Washington, but I spent the past 3 years in New York City working in City Hall, including on some things related to municipal workforce, which is part of why I'm interested in all this. And, yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Sunny Zhang. I am second year Master of Public Policy student at Harvard Kennedy School. I'm originally from Shanghai, China, and I'm super interested in this project because I love budgeting and I love meeting different stakeholders. I got trained as a mediator and negotiator, and I'm super interested in seeing how those skills can be applied to this project.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alita Monaco. I'm also a first year MPP student at HKS. I'm from New York City, and my background has been predominantly in climate work. So I worked in climate consulting for state, federal, and local governments, and then I worked at a climate software startup. I'm very excited to kind of learn more about local politics in this project. I think we have Sarah online. Yeah.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm so sorry I couldn't physically make it to Brookline today. But my name is Sarah Shu. Before pursuing grad school, I was a community advocate, primarily working on renewable energy advocacy, but I have experience working at the state level, thinking about program evaluation and budgeting. I'm originally from San Francisco, and I believe we have a final member of our team, Roberto, who unfortunately was unable to join today, but will be joined for future meetings.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all for being a part of this. It's really great to have you and your wealth of expertise as part of this group. You'll see today, we met with this team internally last week, had a great discussion with them about some of the background that's going on here and the work that's going on. They are going to meet with the team, the staff team on a weekly basis to kind of coordinate with as the project progresses and as your report writing progresses. The first thing that they're going to be working through is the town projections potential cut list, which we are working on this Thursday to present to the ultimate subcommittee for the town work on that side. And then from there, we'll be able to kind of build out sort of a scope of work for them to assist us on as we look through the possibilities, the questions of if and when a ballot question is put out, what the structure of it is. They are already digging deep into a variety of the polling and materials that we provided, including the Polko survey from the satisfaction survey from last year, a variety of surveys from the comp plan onward to look at the sentiment of the community and the needs of the desires for the community. So it's just great to have this diverse group of subject matter experts to come and be a part of this team together. So thank you all for being a part of this project and welcome aboard.
Yes.
We can talk about the MPP program at some point.
The agenda mentions project discussion. Are there any members of the committee who want to ask questions about the project, either Chaz or just ask any questions of our guests?
Well, actually, initially the plan was to do this introduction and discuss the project more generally with them last week as part of that meeting. But
yeah,
we had that scheduling snafu and we had to push things back. So we had the discussion internally about the project. And
okay.
Where we are on that front there. Okay. So I think from here we can move on to the subcommittees.
Is it possible just to give us who weren't present, a little bit of a summary of what you spoke about?
Sure. I mean, we just spoke very broadly about what the Expenditures and Revenue Studies Committee's charge was, a little bit of a history of the program, of past study committees in Brookline, the demographic makeup of the town's challenges, both in terms of revenue, property tax revenue and elsewhere, increasing healthcare costs. Bella Wong was there for that discussion. We had a good discussion about the upcoming issues that we expect to see on both the town and the school side. We talked about how the school committee just finished with those questions that we're going to talk about later on in this discussion. We talked about the town's priorities and where we are in terms of our potential budget gap and the sort of levers that we're anticipating. We think we could potentially pull to address those things. And we talked about what the ultimate timeline was for this project, which is a recommendation in December in advance of the financial projections coming out at the end of the year, and then a full report from this committee in sometime in January. And so that was the kind of tenor of the discussion, and wound up being very productive.
Thanks. And have any of the students been involved in a ballot initiative before?
Have any of you been involved in a ballot initiative before? Nope.
Ooh, so it's a learning opportunity. Okay, great.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yes, certainly.
I wanted to, first of all, welcome Mariah. I think you are an important addition to our committee and bring with you not only your experience on the school committee, but your experience with other organizations and activities in the town. I feel that the schools have been well represented up to now through the work of Jesse and Sarah, but both of them are newer certainly to the school committee and to this process. And so I look forward to the opportunity of hearing more about the kinds of issues and concerns that you've been grappling with, and how we as a committee can learn and understand more about that. Have you had an opportunity to hear from your school committee colleagues, Sarah and Jesse, to sort of help you a little bit with where we have been?
So thank you, Sergio, first off, for that welcome. I've had the opportunity to debrief with Jesse, Sarah, Sadaf, and Cliff, I think, a little bit. So I've heard from some people. I may have even forgotten a few people who I've talked to along the way. But I definitely have heard a little bit, and I have been trying to review the meeting materials in between my other obligations so that I at least was getting a little bit caught up. I haven't been able to watch recordings. I don't have that much time to fill those in for the past 6 months of work. But just for people so they know, I was on advisory for 5 years before I was on school committee. So I was on advisory from 2015 to 2020, and then school committee from 2020 until now. And so I do bring some of that background, or I bring all of that background to this too, as well as being involved in the 2015, 20, I think all the overrides except 2018 when I was out of the country. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I haven't gotten, I'm still thinking about all the different things I've heard, and I'm interested to see how the committee rolls out, and I don't want to necessarily think too much about, rely on what people have told me. I'll be interested to participate going forward and to bring what I know to the conversation from this point forward.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Should we move on?
Sure.
So item number 4 is next, and I'm going to turn it over to Sadaf for that. Sadaf Kazmi.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So we had a conversation on the 18th, as many will hopefully recall, around a proposed structure for subcommittees for this group in order to advance our work. So that memo is actually included in here from the 18th. I didn't make any edits to the version from the 18th. I know there were some comments and discussions on this. The focus of this conversation is to make sure that everyone is aligned on the 3 proposed subcommittees that are included in this document. So that starts sort of towards the end of page 2. And the 3 subcommittees are: 1 focused on town expenditures and revenues. Number 2 is focused on school expenditures and revenues. And the 3rd is focused on long-term strategic questions. There are topics in here that are recommended for these subcommittees to work on, but ultimately subcommittees will sort of define, the scope and the focus of their work. So I wouldn't sort of, spend too much time on that. the focus of this conversation is to make sure is to open up a discussion, see if anybody has any questions on those proposed subcommittees, and then to possibly vote on whether we advance those subcommittees. And then there was a draft that was shared via email by Chaz on possible membership for those subcommittees, which we'll talk about as well. And some topics around sort of non-member addition to that subcommittee as well.
I do just want to say, one of the pieces of feedback that I got on membership was that it was important to have membership be an odd number and just reflects broader expertise in both the town and the school side. So I've moved things around a little bit in terms of a proposed membership, and I'll share my screen if I could.
Sorry, 1 second, Chaz.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Tiffany.
There you go.
Thanks. So I moved things around a little bit. Cliff Brown volunteered to pull double duty, but you can see the future proposals needs additional membership, particularly and representation, particularly on the school side. So when we get to this issue, I want to start, I think it's wise to start with the charge and the discussion there. But when we talk about membership and whether or not ex officio or members can be a part of this, I think it's really important to have voices on the school side be represented on that futures committee list. So people who are not currently, we talked a little bit in that email about how committees can select their own membership and bring people on board. But I think it's really important to make sure that there's someone from the schools on that front. I see Mariah's got her hand raised.
This is just a question of clarification. So the overall committee has voting members and alternate members, correct?
Correct.
And so does that same voting and alternate carry to these subcommittees? And if not, is everyone on each subcommittee voting? How does that work?
Yeah, the thought was that everyone on the subcommittee votes, but because they're alternates, I don't believe that triggers an open meeting law problem. Because there are enough alternates, I don't think that triggers an open meeting law problem. You don't have any more than 4 permanent members on any one subcommittee. But the thought would be, yes, that even people who are alternates who have been part of the process throughout would be allowed to vote. Yeah.
Okay, and then the second thing is that Val Frias is muted, but is willing to sit on the futures subcommittee.
Great.
If that's what you were asking was for.
Yeah, some
Okay.
school committee, ideally someone on the school committee. So that would be great. She's willing to do that.
Current chair.
He is the current chair of the school committee, yes. And I think that's good to have Bernard and Val on there.
The other thing is, I understand, Chaz, any ex officio members would not be voting members of the subcommittees.
That is correct, but I think in this instance, the subcommittees can make their own rules. In this instance, if you want, I think it makes sense. Given the situation, the initial thought was that folks who did not, the initial thought was that maybe folks would have ex officio members from outside of the process be a part of this. We've had some people volunteer, and I've relayed that volunteer information to the members involved in this process. And I think the initial thought was, yes, maybe ex officio members would not vote, but ultimately I think the subcommittees can make their own determinations on that front.
Yeah. Okay.
So should we consider that we are taking a vote, both to approve this division into subcommittees and the membership as on the screen? And Tiffany, I'm wondering if it'd be best to keep that up on the screen.
I can do that at my moment.
Or Chaz.
Yeah, I was going to put the charge up there.
And with that in mind, anybody want to ask questions or offer thoughts?
So I have a question, more of a clarification. So I'm also interested in potentially working on the long-term subcommittee. I'm concerned about my time capacity.
Right.
How does it work in terms of how the subcommittees will be stood up? I think this is all subject to open meeting law, so it'll be sort of publicly posted. Can I participate in the subcommittee and be able to participate in the conversation versus sort of being an attendee, even if I'm not sort of officially part of the subcommittee, just because I don't want to overcommit from a time perspective.
Right. I think it's ultimately up to the body. You know, if you want to be a part of that, I think Dick's got his hand up.
Yeah, I would think that if the meeting is posted and is an open meeting, you can participate
Yes, although you did.
within the ambit of the open meeting law.
You did, right. We just then have to be careful, because this is technically a 9, I believe, what is it, 9 or 11?
9.
No, 9, yeah. It's a 9-member body, so you have to watch for 5 or more members.
Yeah, and I don't think we're.
You're not close on that one yet.
Yeah.
No, you've got, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, you could absolutely participate in that process without necessarily being a full member. You just have to make sure in the event that 5 or more people arrive, that you are coordinating without deliberating about who is speaking and who is not.
So you're saying that, say there's 5 members of towns. Say one of the other 4 members who wasn't a member wanted to go, they couldn't speak because there would at that point it wouldn't have been doubly noticed.
That's right.
Yeah, okay. So basically the only meeting that people can go to and attend is the futures meeting, as long as there aren't 5 people there total.
So you can always attend, you just can't comment.
Right, I'm sorry, I meant like as a working member, so to speak.
Correct, that's right.
I get a clarification on that. I draw a distinction between attending, being recognized and being able to speak, and voting. I think they're separate problems. So could you clarify that question?
So the open meeting law prohibits deliberation outside of a noticed meeting. So in the event that there are with a quorum of members outside of a meeting. So in the event that there were 5 members, full-time members of the Expenditures and Revenues Committee at a subcommittee meeting, there would need to be no more than 4 members talking, deliberating. We've tried to, when we've given guidance to the select board and other boards on this, we've tried to make that line fairly firm. Realistically, sure, someone somewhere, you know, for example, if you went to public comment at a meeting, you might be able to offer that public comment if there was a public comment period. But what we generally say is the open meeting law, you know, the Attorney General enforces it, you know, why open ourselves up to the potential of an open meeting law complaint? We just say to folks, there's the opportunity to provide comment and provide feedback, just to avoid open deliberation at these meetings, if you see that there's a quorum present. Yes, Dick.
So where we have 5 members of the subcommittee for the first 2 subcommittees, not all of whom are voting members of this committee.
Correct.
You're concluding that's okay.
That is okay. I understand. Alternates don't count.
Okay. May I assume another option would be just to double notice it?
Yes,
Say
we could always,
subcommittee and
yeah,
an RSC meeting.
yes, we could always double notice it if we need to. And I think that sometimes that might be
true.
Yeah.
Chaz, could I make a request? Could you consult with Joe to give us explicit written guidance on how these committees can operate cleanly? Just so that, because with this being a very visible committee, I wouldn't want there to be any question about, and given how complicated it is with alternates and members and all that, that way we just have very clear written understanding of what we are allowed to do without being accused of any OML violation.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I would appreciate that, because we just went through this with school committee this year, and it was illuminating things that we had thought were okay, which were not okay. So, and that's even more straightforward than this is. So I would be grateful. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. And Joe, we'll be sure to we'll circle back after the meeting. Yes.
Mine is not a structural one as much as will the subcommittees be required to hold open meetings? And we didn't in the timeline that Sadaf provided, there was nothing for the whole body to have a meeting where public is invited to give us their opinions.
So that is, you know, our overall timeline. I do anticipate there will be at least 1 meeting, probably even 2, at which we have a full public hearing and solicit public feedback.
And that would be for the full committee. Do the
Yes.
subcommittees need to do that?
No, unless they feel it's important to do so. But I have made commitments. In particular, I have invited the members of the unions and other leadership there who want to be heard as part of this process, to be able to speak, at public comment.
Okay, if you have dates in mind, it would be helpful if you shared them as tentative so we could mark them in the calendars.
Our goal, once these subcommittees are set, is to basically build out a calendar for the rest of the year.
Great, thanks.
Can I ask another question about the subcommittee's remits?
Sure.
The information that's in the memo, is that final? Like, for example, if you're on the school subcommittee, are the only things your work is those 5 areas?
Sadaf, you want to take that?
Yeah, I can take that. So this was based on some earlier conversations that happened in this committee. So these were like questions that were raised or sort of topics of discussion. And then on the 11th of September, we had a discussion on a prior version of this. There was some feedback. So this was sort of a second draft of that of sort of the proposed focus areas. However, the proposal here is that subcommittees would refine, their focus, or sort of, update it based on what they can get done and what they think the highest value work is once they're assembled. So this is not sort of the final list of what they will work on. I think each subcommittee will need to sort of come back with, here are the things that we're going to be able to do and we think is the right focus for this group.
Yeah, I think, for example, when we look at the 5 bullets under the schools, when we have that discussion about the responses to the questions that Bella and her team put together, which thank you for doing that. I think that may inform what that subcommittee focuses on, given the answers that are in there. There's a lot of information in there that addresses parts, questions 1 and 2 are on that list. And I really think the 3rd bullet winds up the 3rd bullet, and then sort of the extrapolating out from there into what the FY27 budget looks like becomes the kind of more salient question. But that's really up to the subcommittee to decide.
Also, the way that they're written, the town's one has the town administration will be reviewing benefits, but then in the second one, it turns into compensation. The schools, it turns into that the town will be reviewing schools' compensation and benefits. And I'm not sure, but anyways, as long as we're getting the chance to review the different remits together and making sure that we're not overlapping and that the right content is in the right sections, I think that's fine.
Yeah, and perhaps that should be sort of part of the timeline, Chaz, that your team assembles just around, refinement of the remit, the focus areas, timeline for the work that the subcommittees will undertake, and then how that'll get integrated together. A couple milestones maybe for the group.
Yep.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Any further discussion? We're gonna vote. Can we put that back up?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So Chaz is gonna put the division of the subcommittees up on the screen so that everybody can have a refresher as to what we're voting for.
Chaz, will you be trying to fill that 5th slot under future if Sadat can't fully commit?
Yes.
Okay.
For the future one. Yeah, so I don't know if and Janet, maybe this is what you're asking. I'm happy to put my name in here and sort of do what I can, or sort of leave it off and participate when I can, whatever works better from an OML standpoint. But it sounds like, based on what I heard, it doesn't matter either way, based on the size of the committee, who's voting and who's not.
Just that we put your name in, recognizing that all of us may have reasons which might cause us to drop out.
All right, that sounds good. Thank you.
So on the understanding that this vote is to approve that there be a schools subcommittee, a town subcommittee, and a future subcommittee, and that the committees be populated as shown on the screen and provided to the committee for the vote today. We'll call a vote of a yes or no to approve that. Starting in order as soon as I call it up.
I'll make the motion.
All right, I'm sorry, and I apologize for going a little bit out of order here. Sergio, please.
There's the motion.
I'll
I
second.
need a second.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Now we can vote.
All right, didn't need to jump the gun there. And I just need to call up a copy of the members of the committee, which here right now. Got it. Nice. So we'll start with Bernard. Bernard, your vote?
Yes.
Dick Minka,
Yes.
Ruth Ellen Fitch,
Yes.
Jeff Rudolph,
Not here.
not here, sorry. Sergio,
Yes.
Janet Gilbert,
Yes.
Sadaf Cosme,
Yes.
Mariah Nebrega.
Yes.
Can't remember, is John Doggett here?
No.
No. And I'm an alternate, I'm not gonna vote, and Jesse's not here and Cliff's not here, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. On to, what I think maybe is the main order of business, for today's meeting. And my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Bella Wong, that, you might wanna lead with your team.
Sure.
The discussion, the presentation and discussion on that.
Sorry to
Sure.
interrupt. Are we not doing the rest of the items under 4?
Right, there were some other items here as well.
All right, Cosme and Mariah, thank you very much. So, for B, is discussion and possible vote on the closeout of the town school financial models subcommittee. If there are any questions on that, this would be the time to ask them.
So the Town School Financial Model Subcommittee, staff produced a memo, following discussions there. And I think based on the conversations that we had there, that the basic recommendations there, which are a recommendation that we take a closer look at shared services in the future, but also in the immediate term, take a look at what is above the line and below the line, and move certain cost areas below the line, meaning that they are not considered shared, but are divided between the town and the schools. Those two recommendations were the central takeaway from that conversation. And I think under these circumstances, it perhaps makes sense for that subcommittee's work to be divided amongst these 3 subcommittees, making clear and particularly the future subcommittee, making recommendations to or adopting those recommendations as they see fit into any final report of this committee regarding the division of revenue and the division of services.
Chaz, I
Yeah.
would just point out something I wasn't aware of till I read Bella's response. We never talked about Medicaid, but it seems clear to me that that should be moved over to the schools if it's currently shared. To me, it's the same logic as some of the things that Melissa was saying about fees that are raised on the town side, and I'm only raising it now because it wasn't part of our discussions at all.
I think that's a good point.
I just want to take note that Jeff Rudolph has entered the waiting room, if he could be admitted.
Doing so now.
Great.
And Sadaf has her hand up.
Sadaf.
So I just want to make sure I understood the proposal. So, Chaz, it sounds like the work that subcommittee was doing wouldn't be dropped necessarily, but it would be just included in the final document. I just want to make sure that there were some things that were outstanding from the prior conversations on this particular topic. We had talked about taking a look at the prior 3 years, 3-year financials in order to understand what this looks like over multiple years. So there's some analysis that had to be done. There was also a next step from our last discussion, which I don't remember when that was at this point, but to sit down with the members of the school central office, as well as Mariah, you, from a finance committee standpoint, to really understand what this would take to implement and sort of look at this from the school's perspective in a little bit more detail from an operational point of view, and to make sure that we had surfaced any questions and issues and operational components that need to be considered. So I want to make sure that before we would vote even to have this subcommittee retired, that we have a path to make sure that we've addressed those outstanding questions to really officially land that piece of work.
That's a good flag. Thank you. On the first question, the issue of the projections and the moving out, we have that information. We've provided that information, I think, to the full committee.
No, we showed 1 year, but we were still working on the 2.
Oh, that's right. We're working on those two extra years. But we that information is, we're still working through, but we can absolutely provide that. I think that's important, particularly in both the town and the school subcommittees will want that information, particularly on the town side, but the schools as well to see those projections. So we will be able to get that information to those committees. And the second question, the second aspect, I think, is one of those questions that the school subcommittee will want to take up. I think particularly this question of how in practice some of the costs would be integrated. I don't think it's realistic at this point for us to talk about a model of shared services, but I think a timeline and an analysis of where we are there is helpful. I would also just say that on our end, staff to staff, we finalized a draft of the memorandum of agreement that was contemplated after the CLA report was issued, and Bella and I are intending to take that to our respective bodies, the school committee and the select board, for their review. On that front, there are commitments in that document that I think will sort of play out some of those issues in terms of closer coordination, and ensuring that we are on the town end upholding our end of the bargain on shared services, and ensuring that we are providing the level of service in the level of contact necessary to maintain those operations. But yeah, I agree with you that we don't want to let those issues drop. And so I don't necessarily think they all get folded into the future subcommittee. I think the broader question of shared services is a future subcommittee question, but I think the practical impact of the above the line, below the line discussion is something that goes both in the town and schools subcommittees going forward. And we can provide that information on the town side about the practical impacts of that.
Can
Okay.
I add on to what, or are you not done yet, Sadaf? I wanted to
No, I
respond.
just wanted to make sure that we're sort of clear on who's doing what, and maybe that's something we can address at the subcommittee level, because I just want to make sure that things don't fall through the cracks and sort of the restructuring of how we're doing the work. So, I mean, what I heard was that some of the analysis on, sort of how you might operationalize a different structure would happen within the school subcommittee, but that the school and the town subcommittee would need to take a look at the shared services and sort of what's above the line and below the line. Is that a fair summary? Chad?
Yes. Yeah. And again, I think, the big questions about how services are integrated and so forth, I think we're just not I think, a commitment from on our end to work through and address those things is really important. But I don't necessarily think, given the timeline, that our time would be well spent trying to hash those issues out. I think that's really what the town school partnership is for, and we just need to recommit to that conversation and ensure that that's where those discussions are happening.
Okay, so the subcommittees make a recommendation and then the town school partnership takes it up?
Yes, and I think the recommendation is not necessarily that sort of the granular, the following things should be integrated and so forth, but it should be more about there should be a greater, an area where services are shared, there should be an analysis and the timeline should be X, and we should move on that front, as opposed to saying, here are the 6 departments that need to reevaluate their shared services.
Can I respond? I had my hand up a while ago.
Go ahead, Mariah.
Thank you. 2 things. One, I want to agree with what I think Sadaf said, which is it's a little bit premature to officially close this committee down, because I think that the memo or whatever the work product is from this committee is going to stand as part of the entire committee's work. And at least I haven't seen it. It sounds like Sadaf said they wanted to talk to me and other people. And I think it would be, I would appreciate having that opportunity before closing the committee today. Second, I want to push back a little bit gently and respectfully on what you just said, Chaz, about sending this work back to Town School Partnership. I think that the benefit of the committee that that this group represents is not as many people who have demonstrated themselves and volunteered to be analytical and to do the analysis work. And not only that, we have these wonderful students from the Kennedy School who are willing to work with us. And so if there is work to be done on the town school revenues allocation side, which was what I understood this committee to be about, as opposed to expenses, which is what I understand the town and the school committees to be about, I think it would be very valuable to have this work be fully fleshed out, and perhaps with the people here who are willing to perhaps provide an analysis back to Town School Partnership for its consideration and adoption. But I think that would be very helpful. In the past, we've talked about things like the Town School Partnership model having a more dynamic aspect to it. And I don't know if that's covered already in your memo, but those kinds of things would be helpful to understand. You know, what is above the line, what's below the line, how the line gets moved, all of those things I would really like to see an affirmation and an intention and a calculation behind them. It would be really helpful.
Dick? Yeah, let me take the elephant in the room of benefits. And medical costs.
Yeah.
Does the memorandum that is going to be presented deal with those as to whether they're going to be above the line or below the line?
Yes, it's just below the line.
Recommendation.
The recommendation is below the line.
I don't even remember the subcommittee voting.
It did not.
We did not, and so perhaps it would be helpful for you to reissue that memo. I don't know if it went beyond the subcommittee, but certainly to refresh all of our memories as to what we decided, what we would propose requires further examination. So to Mariah's point, what I hear Chaz saying is we don't have the time or the bandwidth to get into discussions of legal services. You're going to do away, schools are going to do away with their consultants, and it's now going to be part of the town side. That, I think, requires further discussion, because we got a sort of top level, and I'm not sure we have the bandwidth to dig into what does it really mean if that happens. But what I do see the committees being able to do is to raise, these are areas that we think are worth further discussion, and maybe even try to impose a timeline. Like BFAC said, you know, here's the timeline to get it done, and nothing happened. But people can refer back to that and say, where are you? We said we would do that, and that would require commitment both from you representing the town and Bella right now representing the schools, plus the various memberships from both parties, to say, this is what we think is important. These are the areas we'd like to see you at least look at first. These are the areas, if we get that far, that we don't think are going to be productive, at least not in the short run. So we can set the table, but I'm not sure we have the bandwidth to come up with the answers. Does that work for you, Mariah?
And I think, I'm sorry, just to jump in there, because I think Mariah raises a good point. There were two separate areas that we were trying to address here. And one was that issue of, you know, how are services shared and so forth. And that's, you know, not set that aside, but, you know, don't do the deep dive into that analysis. It really is the first analysis, what Mariah is talking about, which is, how does the town school split operate? What is the model that we use? Should we, you know, one of the earlier discussions is, should we shift off that model altogether? Should we move to fixed cost increases as opposed to shared cost, a 60-40 split for the rest? 59-41, if you're going to be technical about it. You know, the memo's recommendation there was, no, we don't want to, not a dramatic shift off of there, but to Mariah's point, clear guidelines on what is above and below the line. And that, I think, is well within this committee's purview, and I think it should be ultimately a proper evidence. So I think to Mariah's point, rather than potentially closing out this committee today, I think maybe we have a final meeting of the subcommittee, and we'll add that to the calendar, at which we invite Mariah, the schools, anyone else wishing to participate on that, and have that conversation so that we can that subcommittee can make a final recommendation and sort of then parcel out that work to the subcommittees doing the draft.
Will we have the dollars? Because it's not just a look forward, but if this were in effect in the 2026 budget and the 2025 budget, I don't know if we have to go back the full 3 years because I don't know what your workload is.
It's hard because there's a lot of changes. So
But just to make sure that we're not proposing something that the numbers we have to date show would be a catastrophe for one side or the other, or that or not allow for issues to be raised. So 2026, 2025 possible.
yeah, I think that, part of what I think the challenge is that, it's easy to say how it would go, how it would work kind of with the steady state, but when we changed the formula the last time, it was when the schools were kind of in this enrollment growth period where we moved benefits above the line, and then we were adding additional enrollment for school related growth. And so that got absorbed both town and school. So now we're kind of in the opposite situation where October is when I take another cut of the database and then see where enrollment still is, but it should be pretty steady, both town and school.
Yeah, see, I'm thinking of just high level numbers. This is the split that we had. We had $400 million. We took these things off the top. And for the main things that we talked about, which I think is benefits, if that were below the line in 2026, and just high level, not the adds, the subtracts, we know that the school budget in particular changes a lot once school opens and they actually know how many kids there are, how many kids at the moment need special help. So there might be additional staff that are needed, but just that high level at the point where you made the division and said to the schools, this is how much money you'll have, to the town, this is how much money you'll have, and see, because I think that's where the impact.
Yeah, the group health number is the biggest variable there. So
yeah, but that just high level.
So it seems that there's a consensus that we're not going to take any action on 4B. My sense is 4C has been dealt with, but am I missing something?
I didn't hear what you said, John.
I think my sense is that 4C was dealt with in the vote that we took
Yes,
prior to 4B.
I think that's right, which is the assignment of membership to subcommittees, including discussion of a possible assignment of ex officios. So yes, the assignments have been set, have been set, and individual committees can accept the assistance of other of ex officio members as they see fit.
Then it seems we are ready to move on to excuse me, 5. But not until Sergio raises one last item.
If I may, I was not a member of the committee that was looking at the model, nor was I informed of the meetings. And maybe I missed it, I don't know. What I'm really driving at is that as this subcommittee is driving to closure, may I request that all members of our body be informed, A, of the meetings, B, of the documents that are in circulation and so forth, so that we can also look at those in the same spirit, I think, that Mariah was raised.
Yes, absolutely. I think that the memo from the subcommittee was circulated late in the summer to the full committee, but I will make sure it circulates again.
And it was always the intent that whatever we recommended would come to the full committee. We just sort of split in many different directions, as is usually the case.
Onward.
All right. Item number 5, and turning the meeting back to Superintendent of Schools.
Okay, great. So thank you. Greetings to everyone. Greetings to our interns from the John F. Kennedy School, and to everyone that's zoomed in on screen. So we were presented questions from this committee, the school department, and I thank you for your patience as we as a team considered our responses. And as you know, I am your interim for this year. Karen Schmuckler on my right is the interim deputy superintendent for the Office of Student Services. And not here is Robin Benoit, who's the interim deputy superintendent of teaching and learning. And then we have Susan Gibbons, who is our deputy superintendent of OAF. And so given that 3 of the 4 senior leadership team are serving as interims, we felt we just needed more time because many of the questions really asked us not about now, but how we got to now. And it did require us to go back to the records and a few, some years passed. And I will say at this point, I felt very good working with the talent of the team that I had to work with. And I do feel good about the answers that we're able to provide to the extent, to the best of our ability, and hope you will be okay with the responses that we are presenting to you. We have the school department has a large budget. A significant portion of that is to the salaries of the staff, which is appropriate because the heart of what we do is what's happening in the classroom. Is that fundamental interaction between teacher and student. There are some other major cost drivers aside from salary, and I would say a lot of it is in student services. Student services directed at probably 1/3 of our population. Specialized services as that goes through a very careful process of referral and assessment before those plans are done. But that is a other significant expense driver in our budget, along with the salaries that go with that. There are a lot of questions around, in particular around tuition for students who are sometimes placed out of district. I think we would agree it's best if we can keep our kids in district for social reasons, but for just being part of the community. But sometimes students are placed out of district and there's a tuition that comes with that. And that is a significant expense item in the budget. So appropriately, a lot of questions about that. And then particular questions around other services that we offered. In the last 3 years, the school department has committed to really periods of reduction. And so they are outlined in the link from FY25 and also what we've done to be into this budget in FY26. So there were a lot of reductions to expenses and to staffing. I would say significantly to the district level, and that was an intentional decision to save what was deemed student-facing staff. But it did come, so it's just so you understand that the senior leadership team working really well with one another, but we're working with less resources than even the permanent team might have had. And so we take good care. And when you ask those questions, responses that we create for you, because we want to be careful in that. But we are working with less staffing, and obviously it remains a high demand district, meeting all the needs of all our students. So
when you use the word fewer resources, what is it that you mean? Staff or other things?
Yeah, there were probably maybe elimination of 6 positions in the
positions.
Yes, at the central office. So all those functions that they might have covered don't exist right now. And so some of that made it more of a challenge for us to access the data to answer your questions. And also will also be more of a challenge to access the data as we plan forward. And so it's just working around that.
Thank you.
So we have a document that, so I'm not sure how best to do this, it's 25 pages long. It's up on the screen. I think Tiffany is doing this. Oh, you are? Yep. Okay, even better. You're right here.
I'm right here.
So I don't know if we go through sections and to see if people have questions. And also the responses are to the questions in the order that we received them. And so we didn't change anything about that or the wording of the questions.
So Bella, I apologize. I'm gonna need a little bit more time to sort of absorb this. Would it be okay to send follow-up questions over email or in a different way, or maybe in a subsequent conversation?
Absolutely. I do appreciate the questions that came in and our effort to respond to them. I will say that at this point, again, the team that's largely interim, we really want to focus on building, going forward in the next step, which is building the FY27 budget and the projections that are needed for this committee to consider. So I don't want you to not, or any member to not forward questions, but to understand the more time we spend on questions about how we got to this point is a challenge for us as we try to build the budgets moving forward. So respectfully, absolutely, no one should hesitate to send a question. But
I would think your focus today should, I'd start from the top because I don't remember all 25 pages. And the parts at the end that I just sort of skimmed, we asked a lot of questions that were, how does this work kind of questions? How does MECA work? How does BEEF work? And that stuff I think we can read on our own because it's more or less mechanical and it's not going to change. We're not going to say no MECA, no beef. Well, we can't say no beef because that's state mandate. So just I'd start from the top. And then if people have other questions, because I was looking at those things and you probably went into more detail than even I would. Just give me a summary. MECO kids are chosen by lottery. We have a chance to do this, bullet point thing. So I think you've gone above and beyond mine, but I would start from the top and just focus on the things that are not mechanical, not this is how it works kinds of issues. Does that work for you?
I might need a little bit more.
So we'll just start from the beginning of the memo and go down and see if there are issues that. So this is a enrollment projection kind of thing.
Yeah, this document was posted. We all have it. It is in the materials that were posted for this meeting.
Yeah.
And we've all had an opportunity to review it. I think you may want to hit your high points, if that makes sense.
I will try my best, but the questions were very particular, so we really did our best to answer them as they were presented to us. Maybe let's just start with special education. I think that people understand there's a range of services that we offer. And I don't know if you want to do that, just the range of services we offered and then how we go about determining who gets what.
Yeah. And so I think we did answer in the question. So one of the things that I think is important for people to understand is student services encompasses the range of services and continuum of programs we provide in general education all the way to special education. So I think people often think it's just special education and it isn't. So for example, all of our counseling and mental health and nursing services, our tiered systems of support in terms of social emotional learning are all provided to every student, right? So that's sort of your student service programming in general education. Now, all students don't use all of the different things that we provide as a robust student service department equally, right? So it's really based on, and when you talk about tiered systems of support, that's what that is, right? So many students will be in tier 1, that's in your general education classroom, getting their social, emotional, and academic and behavioral needs met in tier 1. Your 3 tiers, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, all exist within general education. And so it's only when students' needs are not being met with disabilities and that they require specialized instruction because we have many students with disabilities who are not in special education. Their needs are met just within the continuum of programming that we provide in general education. The more robust programming you provide at the general education level, the fewer students need to be in special education in terms of that specialized instruction. So student services is a big tent in terms of what we do. And so many of the questions, as you've seen in terms of asking about what are the tiered services for groups like your MECO and your materials fee, we don't disaggregate that at a financial level for any group of students. When students need specialized instruction, which is really the essence of special education, there's an evaluation process that students go through that is very comprehensive. Ready to find out first, does the student have a disability? That's the first requirement. If they do have a disability, do they need specialized instruction in order to receive a free and appropriate public education, which is our federal mandate, right, under the IDA. And the IDA, which was passed by Gerald Ford in November the 29th of 1975, is going to be 50 this year. This November, we will have had the IDA. As you know, that opened up the doors for students who historically have been excluded. Why it's relevant financially is the IDA, the federal government said they would fund the IDA at 40% of needs, and to date, the IDA is funded at around 13%. So coming from the federal level, local school districts and towns are already underfunded in terms of what that federal mandate is. But as we all know, right now there have been no changes to federal funding for special education. We do not know what's coming down the line in terms of that. Sticking on the sort of the fiscal side of that, so you have the federal underfunding of special education, and then we also know that at the local level, Massachusetts, Chapter 766, and then many of you, if you look at our private schools, they're known as Chapter 766 private schools. That actually came from the law that was passed in Massachusetts in 1972, which formed the background to the federal law. Why that's important is we have probably one of the most robust frameworks for special education in the country, which is wonderful in Massachusetts. And it is also underfunded at the state level, right, in terms of the Chapter 70 formula and how we look at reimbursements. Again, pushing more stress and pressure on local towns and school districts. As we get into, which there were a lot of questions around out-of-district placements, one of the other pressure points for districts and school districts and towns is that when students with very significant developmental or medical or mental health needs need residential placement, the onus of that in Massachusetts falls largely on school districts. It is not shared with the Department of Public Health or the Department of Mental Health or our private health insurance. And so when you sort of look at what are the fiscal, we talk a lot about the pressure points in terms of districts and pressure points on district budgets, on local town budgets. One of the pieces around special education funding, and we have seen exponential costs in terms of since the pandemic across the board, is it sort of starts at the federal level, goes down to the state level. In terms of tuition, post the pandemic, districts, out of district schools got a 14% bump in FY 2024. That was not something that the Mass Association of School Superintendents were involved in. It was not something that was predicted, that anybody knew was coming at the time. Operational Service Division, which is who determines tuition rates, made a unilateral decision. So as we sort of sit here today in FY 25, all of these, both historical trends and state trends are really pushing and creating a lot of pressure points in terms of special education. One sec. And this is, if those of you follow the news, is Brookline and every other district in Massachusetts. We're certainly seeing a rising level of complexity of need of students across the board in medical, mental health, and again, with a lot of kind of issues that are intersecting in terms of driving those pieces. So that just sort of gives you the sort of, the fiscal piece, both at the federal level, but also at the state and local level in terms of districts. And in Massachusetts, school districts really carry that fiscal imperative in terms of meeting the federal mandates of IDA. And then Massachusetts has frameworks that are even more robust in many areas than what the federal mandates require.
And so in addition, sorry, to what Karen said, how does Brookline compare to other communities? Actually, our number of students that are placed at a district is especially on the low side. It's quite positive, but then you may say, well, why is the tuition line go up? And as Karen said, because it's going up at a higher than the typical inflation rate, 14% in 1 year. And I think actually the next year it was maybe 7. Yeah, so the amount of the tuition is going up.
My question was, if we could go back to the chart that we were looking at.
Sure.
I had 2 very specific number questions there. The first,
This one?
yeah, thank you. The first is, there's a dramatic change in the transportation line of almost 100% between 23 and 24. Goes from 2.3 to 4.6. Is there a known understanding about what caused that?
So that might be a better question for Susan.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's online.
She's online.
Yeah, I understand.
Susan, did you hear the question?
I did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I don't have a deep understanding of the expenses in 23. That was a year before I arrived. I do know that in 24, we were grossly underfunded in that area. So I can't really tease out in any kind of definitive way what caused the increase from 23 to 24. One of the things I have observed, though, is that not all of the invoices were paid in FY 23. And we did have to pay some transportation expenses in 24. That was a couple of $100,000. It certainly doesn't make up the delta here. But I don't have a good understanding of what was happening in 23 that would explain why that number was so low and then jump to the 4.5 million. What I can also say, though, is that we went out and bid our transportation services for special education so that effective in 25, 26, 27, we have better rates than we did back in 24. So the costs are not increasing at the same pace. So we've kind of captured the expense and have it more under control in that way. But I really don't know what the difference is between the 23 numbers and the 24.
So I think what I'm hearing is that the 23 number is suspect. That is, it may have been under budgeted. So part of the comparison is making 2 things start off in a way which is deceptive, perhaps.
What I can say is that the 24 and 25 budget
The 24 and 25, yeah.
Underfunded. So you're looking at here in the school. Yeah, we're grossly underfunded in those years. We're looking at expense. So this is how we landed. But if you looked at budget to actual, you would have seen the budget itself was underfunded because it was predicated upon this low number in 23 when the budget was developed for 24. Again, I didn't develop the 24 budget.
My confusion is that you're reporting 23 as an actual expense.
Yes.
At 2.3 million. That's what we pay. So that's why I'm completely startled that it doubled.
Yeah.
So that's the first question. Second question, and thank you. Second question, come back to the chart for one moment.
Sure, 1 second, sorry.
Is that the circuit breaker allocation from 25 to 26 jumps by something like 2.5 million. And I'm just kind of trying to understand, where did that 2.5 million come from? How are you able to make that kind of a budget change? You must be taking it from some other elements.
This is actually fundamentally the structural deficit that we face going into FY 27. So the district historically receives around 4 million a year into the circuit breaker fund, and that is a reimbursement of the prior year. So you're nodding, so I think you understand that that's coming from the state. And so the district typically would collect it in that fiscal year and then use it in the next year. What happened between FY 25 and FY 26 is that for FY 26, we're using about 2 million approximately from the money that's coming in this year, when typically
You're
the
spending
district
it
would be
for.
banking it and would be using it in FY 27. So in the budget, that's why it's showing 6.2 million.
Yep.
Because 2 million of it is coming from what's gonna come in this year on top of what district typically does. And that is the illustration of the structural.
So there's a short 27 will reflect that further shortfall, which we don't see yet, but we'll see shortly. Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to touch.
Is that okay, Susan? That I?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, just following up on the transportation question a bit. There is a DESE website that shows costs specifically related to special education. And the most recent year that I saw, when I looked at it a little while ago, was for 23 to 24. And it showed special ed transportation in district of 2.5 million and special ed out of district transportation of 1.6 million, 4.1 million, which is not too far different from what you've got up here. I'm curious as to what that if those numbers are accurate, what is generating $2.5 million of in-district transportation related to special education? I can understand why there would be an out-of-district cost when you're taking kids to schools that are outside of the district, but I found the discrepancy baffling.
Do you want to take that, Karen, or do you want me to?
You can, Susan.
Well, I'll just start us off. How about that? There are district-wide programs that are specialized. And so I might be a student that lives far from it, or I may be a student that's not able to ride regular transportation independently. So that becomes special transportation within district. Does that get you started, Susan?
Yes, exactly. That's what it is. We have really quite remarkable in-district programming, which as a result of that, we have low out-of-district placements. So we're able to accommodate more students internally than most other school districts. Our programs are located in schools, but they're located by program. So if there's a student that is in the RISE program that at the elementary level, then they would be attending one of the schools that has a RISE program, and we would transport those kids from their residential location to their school. And so we do have a very significant population of students that we transport internally. Also, summer programming, we have transportation in the summertime as well, and so that's in district because all of our programming for those kiddos is in district as well. And when you look at the numbers too, the other thing that's that is different about my transportation number than the DESI one is that this transportation number includes like McKinney-Vento, foster students, et cetera, is all wrapped up in our transportation number, where those might be separated out in the DESI number.
So that's good what Dick said. The DESI number has two components. So I'm wondering if the low cost in 23 is because it's only picking up one of those components. We know that the schools have had issues of classifying, reclassifying, changing, all the way back to when I was on advisory committee. So that might account for it. And this staff has no way of knowing. If I understand what Susan has told us in the past, she can't go back. It's sort of this black hole, which is why I keep saying maybe we're trying to look too far backwards because we're not getting comparable data.
And I don't know if it doesn't account necessarily for that huge gap that you're describing, but one of the things that certainly in the small time that I've been here, we have a much larger number of students who are in the McKinney-Vento program than we used to have. So that's students who are homeless. And one of the things they are entitled to stay in their district that they were in before they became homeless. So we transport students from all over Massachusetts back into Brookline if that's deemed the best thing for that student. And that's obviously a requirement on Brookline and everyone else. And so that obviously is significant transportation costs because you're transporting students pretty wide geographic region. I don't know if it accounts for what you're looking at in terms of that. And it's hard to sort of, I think, as Susan said, what's captured in our number versus what DESI's capturing, to your point. But that's a growing population that we're seeing in terms of more and more students, unfortunately, who are unhoused.
Do you know when that growth, that's the right word, when it started to explode?
So I wasn't here, but my understanding is it's been post-COVID, post-pandemic, that we've seen a steady rise and increase, unfortunately, in students who are unhoused.
Thank you.
And Mariah, it's John. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, but thank you for asking.
Sure.
Can we go just scroll down because we touched on it and went back just to the out of district chart. So I think, you know, Susan touched upon that. We do, and Brookline has a long history of inclusion and building robust in-district programming. And so you do see that reflected in our out of district numbers. We have always had historically low numbers compared to the state. But we also have the lowest out of district numbers of all our comparison districts, which is what you see on that chart. It's both the districts that the town's using for comparison, and it's also the districts that DESI uses for comparison in terms of demographics. We are the most diverse district of our DESI demographic comparable districts. And so that's really where that's reflected. And while it's, you know, it's varied up and down over the years, it's remained historically low. And this is going back, you know, from when I was here the last time. So really sort of decades. And when you think about the exponential, you know, one of the things, and we shared this in the report, you don't do what you prevent, you don't cost out, right? We should, right? So if you prevent 3 or 4 unnecessary placements, because there are always necessary placements, we're not costing out what those placements, should they have gone out, would have cost the district over time, both in when you have a placement go out, you also then have your transportation cost, right? And so it's both tuition and transportation. And so, you know, when we look at that chart and we look at, you know, our numbers in terms of our out-of-district placements, we are constantly building our programming and adding programming again to prevent unnecessary placements, which are, you know, we don't do that as a cost reduction strategy. We do it because it's what's best for kids. These are our Brookline citizens. They have the best outcomes. That's what our research and outcome data shows us. And it is also cost effective in terms of servicing students. But we don't capture that, right, by the fiscal level. We probably should. And there's certainly ways to do that in terms of that. But so you don't see that in terms of that level of analysis
In my experiences at working in different districts, this is really positive data, very positive data. And what it reflects is trust in the quality of the programming that's being provided. So it's just really, really strong positive data. So tuition is a big expense in your budget, but against the comparables, you're doing very well. And again, the factors that exacerbate tuition are beyond inflation, it's just something that everyone's feeling here. But this is very good news.
Given our timeline, you want to talk a little bit about Medco and materials fee, since I know those were
Sure.
other issues.
So if you go back to that chart, which shows where our residents materials, the one that looks like it was. Okay.
Yeah.
So we did receive questions around students that come to us through materials fee. And again, that's children of town staff. Most more school department than other towns, but it's eligible for all the town staff. And it's actually a significant recruitment retention tool. We were asked how it compares to other districts. Actually, our comparable districts that we compete against for staffing generally don't charge a material fee. So as a teacher in those other districts, you are often allowed to have your child attend that district for no fee. So I think that Brookline is in this sort of spot where you're mitigating, you're collecting that money, and I believe it's over 600, well over 600,000 that's coming in through that in the material fee. The Medco students, there is a grant that comes from the state that pays for the transportation, and actually there's some other expenses that are charged against the grant, which are revealed in the responses to the questions that were asked. There is a perception that is there a higher percentage of students that come through the material fee or Medco that are receiving specialized services? But those specialized services that might be attributed to students that are coming through these two categories are always in district. So as I said, the largest expense in student services that we're offering is coming from the tuition and special transportation line. And so that is not what material fee or medical student are contributing to. I don't know what else to say about,
You decide, the schools decide where to place the students coming in from Medco. So if you know they have a special need, do you put them in the school that offers those services?
Typically, it'll be at a level of service that is in building.
Yeah.
So it's going to be moderate need, learning center based.
Yeah.
Placement of material fee students and Medco students are going to be space available anyway. That's really what drives where students are placed.
So the question is, so if I'm a Medco student and there's no room in School X, which has a program that I need, then you're transporting me. Is that basically what happens?
So that student may be placed there, but that's really on a more rare circumstance. Okay. Most of the students, if they're getting services, are going to be moderate through the learning center, which is offered throughout the school. But again, the major expense driver in student services will be the tuition. Yeah.
And if our costs for transportation go up, does the Medco grant go up? How do they determine what to pay us? Is it district by district? Like, we're pretty close to Boston, so you'd expect our transportation costs are less than, say, if they're going out to Lexington or Concord, assuming they have Medco students. So do we get less money per student than they do, or
it's based on enrollment? But actually, most of our students come in through the T. Yeah, so many of our students are coming through the public transportation line. So Brookline is unique because it has so many ways of getting here, and so the students, and I actually think it's a really positive experience for them because of they're able to get here more independently and stay longer, and it increases their access to
So
program.
Metro has, per student transportation fee that it pays.
For the students that are receiving transportation, so I think it must be the younger students, not high school. There's no high school transportation. I don't know, Susan, if you have,
It doesn't really,
yeah,
it's.
but our high school students are coming in on the T.
Yeah, but the Metro allotment is
All
standard.
transportation is covered by the grant.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, that's a better answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sergio.
Somewhere around April, a document appeared from the superintendent, Hillary, which was the enrollment chart of every school by every grade, by every classroom. With March of this year. This was looked at by a number of people, and there seemed to be some discrepancies in information that was very basic. For example, how many sections in a given school, which is a known fact, 3, 4, 5, 6. Has that chart ever been revisited and, for lack of a better word, corrected so that it becomes a useful piece? Because that chart, among other things, showed by the superintendent's own language compared to PSB policy, there were over 1,100, that was his term, empty seats. And there were 18 classrooms in addition to that were totally closed, all of which produced a total of enrollment potential which exceeds the capacity of 2 K-8 4-section schools, over 1,500, which implies that placement for income, like Metco or materials fee, Metco, as I understand, we accept at kindergarten, and they stay with us. So the decision of where you put them when they arrive in kindergarten, they would remain in that school. So this kind of information needs to be reliable, I would think, to address, for example, the suggestion that Janet made about putting a student in the school where they're best served, since they don't have a Brookline address, right? They're not coming with an expectation that they're going to the school, or they're not even in a buffer zone. So the bottom line is, do you have a document which allows you to make the kind of planning, which I would think would be very important to the superintendent?
So, in my due diligence coming in as interim, I've looked at a lot of documents, and the one you described is that discrepancy I am not aware of. I know Susan's online, she can respond to that, but we are prepared on November 6th to do the enrollment report. And also part of that presentation includes the class size analysis across the schools. I know in response to one of the questions that was presented to us about what the number of extra classrooms, and Susan was able to do that analysis and determine the answer is 6 at Driscoll School. Again, Susan might want to say more, but yes, November, I agree with you. The enrollment projection, the accuracy of that is critical to the building of the budget. And so we're prepared to do that in November.
When we looked at that document, the March 2025, Dr. Gibbons was participating with us, and we observed these questions. She confirmed that there seemed to be these discrepancies. I was then surprised when in the answers to the reports here, the reference to the 6 classrooms at Driscoll was backed up by a reference to the same March 2025 superintendent's report, which I thought had been discredited. So I was left confused.
So I would ask Susan, I'm not sure what part of it, raised questions. Maybe she's not online anymore.
Susan, are you on?
I'm on. Yes, I'm on. I mean, I'm hearing a lot today that, is kind of new to my ears, some familiar and some new. So this is the report that has been used here in Brookline for quite some time. And it does show the number of sections in each school. It also shows the guidelines across the top in pink, which are the school committee's, I guess we'd say preferred or recommended guidelines for class size. What I did say in the spring, and is true, and one of the things that I have done as I'm looking forward, is that there are some schools that have incredibly small spaces. And so you can't fit 25 kids in a class. And so I've made some adjustments when I'm looking at it so that I'm not making an assumption that we can fit, for example, in the Pierce School at the middle school level, 25 kids in a classroom when they can't fit in a classroom because of the size limitations of the space. So I've made some corrections in when I'm looking at this and making recommendations.
Shows the 18 empty classrooms.
I don't know where 18 that number is not ringing a bell with me.
Just count them up. They're marked out in color. That's all I did.
You mean the grade?
And what?
Is it the grades?
Yes. And
Those aren't empty classrooms.
3-section school.
Okay.
No, isn't true.
So she's saying they're not empty classrooms.
That doesn't represent empty classrooms. Okay, so that's where that number is coming from. Yeah, that doesn't represent empty classroom. What that represents is that there isn't a 4th section in that school right now. So what do we do? The question then becomes, so what do we do with some of these spaces? And I tried to describe that a little bit in the narrative. So when we have some of these specialized programs, then those spaces can get used for those specialized programs. So for example, in Driscoll, I use this example here, at the Driscoll School, we introduced the Winthrop House program at the middle school level. And because there was space available there, we brought that in-house special education program to that school. So those spaces are being used for that program. The only spaces that I'm aware of in looking at every space in our schools that has classrooms that are available that are not being used right now are the ones at Driscoll. All of the other classrooms have programming in them, except there. So when you see those gray areas, it's to help us as we're looking through this, because you're looking at an internal facing document here that we use. So I understand if people look at that and they say, oh, we have these empty classrooms, anything in gray is an empty classroom. That is not true.
It's also true.
We don't have a 4th section. We only have 3 sections in that grade level. That's all that means.
But Driscoll has 4 sections, we agree. And it's shown here with 3 sections.
That's built for 4 sections.
It's built for 4.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
It's built for 4.
It's built for 4.
The prayer fields. It's new.
So those are empty.
No, you're conflating classrooms with classes. This is actual classes of students, not classrooms in a building.
Right.
When Pierce is completed and comes back online, will that have the number of classrooms? I forget, I think that's also 4-section school. Will that be filled as far as you can tell?
That's coming in on in around 28. When we look at our enrollment projections, from Cropper and McGibbons, it looks like at the elementary level, that's when we will start to see the increase, a greater increase in overall enrollment. It starts creeping up a bit, even next year at the elementary level, but our overall enrollment projections will be increasing unless something dramatic changes. And we can't control all of that, but from what we understand at this point, we anticipate we're going to have enrollment growth, not significant like you had before at 3% a year or anything, but a gradual and steady enrollment growth. When, according to the Cropper McGibbons report, it never gets as, I will say, is high as what you experienced back, 10 years ago when you started all the building projects. It doesn't appear that it's ever going to get that packed here again. So you should be able to accommodate the enrollment growth that you're going to see over the next couple of years within the school capacities that you have once Pierce opens.
Okay, and following that, you're saying that as school enrollment grows, then filling in that fourth section at Driscoll is definitely something that will happen. Are you looking at, since one of the things you can't control is where the kids are? A long time ago, there was talk about maybe redrawing districts, and that was around the time that we were considering a ninth school, which never came to be. Is that something also that you're looking at so that you can even out some of the schools, or is that something not within the capacity of the interim leadership that we have right now?
Have you looked at the current buffer maps?
No.
The entire town
Is a buffer.
is a buffer.
Yes, I was gonna say that
Non-issue.
the fact that there are
Please
buffers.
don't spend any time on it because it's a non.
And that was the question. Is it something that's gonna be an issue? You said, no, I don't have to read the buffer map. I
The
can believe you.
buffer, yes.
They have a lot of flexibility, and it's based on the work that was done by Rebecca Stone and Neil Wyshynski and a couple of others back in 2012. It had a small tweak at one point, but fundamentally, they have excellent ability to put children where they feel they should go. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, I was just gonna describe the buffer zone.
Yeah. You don't need to.
I would also add that the policy itself allows for placement of students outside of their zones depending on availability as well. So it goes even beyond the buffer zone.
But I want to come back to that chart because every statement that I made is not one that I created. It's written on the chart. The language of empty classrooms and empty seats is on that chart, and it came from the superintendent's office. So I have to assume that it was reliable. When we discussed it with Dr. Gibbons and we looked at ourselves at some issues, it suggested that there were some things that were not clear. For example, B, which does exist in some of our K-8s, is not on this chart. That clearly is using some classroom. And as the leases expire going forward, I think we certainly would expect more of the B program to return to the K-8 school. So I'm not suggesting it's necessarily a bad thing, but the idea that the administration doesn't have a document which gives all of this information, I think must be very difficult for you to administer. Or maybe it exists and we haven't seen it. I don't know which. Thank you.
Yes, I think actually the responses refer to this, and I think you have confidence in the data and the charting that does exist. I can only appreciate that the presentation must not have made it clear. And so it's good to have those questions. But I think we do have a command of where the space availability is, but I absolutely.
This refers back to that chart we were just looking at. So
right.
I'm just trying to understand if it's right, reliable, okay, but I can't make sense out of it. maybe you can. Thank you.
Very good.
Fair enough, onward.
Are there other key points that you think is important for us to touch on in this discussion?
I think I tried to touch on, the big drivers.
Right.
And also acknowledge the context of questions that came forward. It was actually it was a good process for us to do it be in our interim roles, to be able to, I don't know if we necessarily would have gone in with such intensity to the prior fiscal years. So I'm glad that we were, it also was a good way for us to get to know each other. But as I said, I think right now we are anxious to have the capacity to look forward and build the budgets moving forward. And so I think we are coming from a better, stronger base.
The one thing in the report that surprised me was that you remain agnostic with regard to setting up a reserve fund.
Yes.
Given the surprises that were in the special ed program, which Dr. Gibbons says she has under control, that's fine. But there's always possibility for surprises. The town maintains what may be an inadequate reserve fund, given that fire department overtime and a bad snow year happening at the same time would be a big problem. So it sort of surprised me because you dipped into tomorrow to fill in a $2 million gap. Wouldn't it be more prudent to, not say, okay, we got $2 million this year, but just to start to build a fund? I'd just be interested in your thinking on that.
So I might have introduced that feeling of what you just described. I know that prior to this, people felt that maybe that was something that they wanted to create, a stabilization fund dedicated to fluctuations that might have in a current year. And I tried to explain in the response, and I'm happy to say again, that it seemed to me the purpose of the stabilization fund would be like for one-time fluctuations. I actually think that the district has exhibited good program planning and has a lot of safeguards in place to be able to project needs in, moving forward in the year or the next two. The circuit breaker fund, at the time when this was first conceived, was less stably funded. It has been more stably funded, actually over the last decade, to the full statutory authorization of 75%. So the fact that you can sort of rely on that more, with greater fidelity, helps you with the long-term planning. The changes in the what ended up being expenses in the tuition settlement line, I don't think reflect a dramatic change in the profile of student in the district. And so, and based on that, I think you can be planful. The risk with putting money in a stabilization fund, it gets earmarked for that purpose only. I guess I'm feeling agnostic because we're in a really challenging place right now, which when you have more flexibility or more surplus, maybe that's like something you can do. I'm just not sure that I feel as your administrator in this position of advocating that has a higher priority over maintaining flexibility at this moment.
Okay, so you're saying the needs in the present need to be addressed and you're comfortable that you'd be able to deal with what might come up that's foreseeable.
Well, we have a structural deficit that I described, and so without additional revenue, I see that as being problematic. But putting money in a stabilization fund earmarked for future fluctuations, isn't necessarily helpful to that.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense to me, that you can't plan so much for the future that you die before you get there. I certainly, you gotta cover today. But because I'd heard about it, basically since I became a member of this committee, it surprised me. And I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Right. I would favor flexibility in the media fiscal year, or the next couple of years. It's not something you wouldn't ever do, but maybe not a priority for this month.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense than what I read in the report. Thank you.
Can I add a comment to that, which is that I think Bella alluded to this. We had some conversation earlier in this year, and the school committee was interested in it. I think that the report as written was, as Bella said, influenced by her perspective, and it's a great perspective, but we haven't necessarily had this same depth of conversation about this topic at school committee yet. And I think personally, in hearing this now, it seems like it's framed as flexibility versus stability, and I'm not sure that that's a true dichotomy, that we can't have both. And so I think it's worth talking about more.
Okay, I know, for example, I was on an advisory when COVID came, and we held off some of what would normally go into our reserve funds because we had to get through the year. There just had to be enough money to cover basic services. So if that's what you're saying, that's what I hear you're saying, that makes a heck of a lot of sense until you're more stabilized to deal with what you have in front of you right now.
Yeah, so
school committee can reverse me, Mariah. I'm not an expert in this. I was just trying to understand how the ground shifted.
Well, one thing also is that there's enabling legislation for this kind of reserve fund that didn't exist. It might not even have existed at the beginning of COVID. I think it was from 2022.
Yeah,
so this is relatively recent enabling legislation.
So I'm aware that the clock is ticking past 4:45. Thank you very much for the presentation. Is there anything you want to add that you haven't had a chance to say at this point?
Yeah, I want to again appreciate the leadership team, and I also want to appreciate Chaz and Melissa because they've been really strong resources in Lincoln as we create, some of what happened and processes that happened. So they've been really important in being able to provide context, along, of course, with Susan and members of the school committee. And I know that members of the committee wanted responses sooner, and I just felt we needed to do it right, and we needed the time. So thank you.
Yeah, you're giving the committee a lot to absorb. Shall we move on to meeting schedule?
Sure. So I think, now that we have the subcommittee set, what's next going to happen is a flurry of emails in your email boxes as we try and schedule everything. But to Sergio's point earlier, we will make sure that the full schedule is sent to all committee members, regardless of where you're serving and on what subcommittee. We'll have the schedule laid out for potential public hearings in November. That will be a full committee process. Committees come back together. I think it's just important to build on what Bella was saying earlier about, now on our end, what we want to be providing to you, which is going to be the most helpful in your work on these subcommittees, is these projections and forecasts for the next several years. Do you get a sense of what we anticipate spending, where we anticipate revenues to be, and what that money is going towards? I think that's that's the salient thing that I think is important for the subcommittees to understand. What programs does this fund? What assumptions does it make? And that allows you to pressure test those assumptions. So what would it look like if we did X? What would it look like if we did Y? In order to ultimately make come back for a full recommendation on that front. We will. So on our end with the lab team, we're going to be working this week on the town side of that, and we'll be able to provide that information to you shortly. I know, as Bella said, they're working as best they can on the school side. So I would just ask, as we follow up on questions and so forth, we just be mindful of the goal here is to get all that information to you so that we can have a productive discussion in the timeframe that we have. Yeah, thanks, sir.
Without pinning you down, but what assumptions are you making on the town side for year-to-year salary increases, wage increases?
So we have, we know what it is next year. We have for all unions except one, we have the contract settled and we know what the cost of living adjustments will be. So we have the actuals for that in a sense where the wages go up. After that, for the next 2 years, we're debating internally. Right now, we're leaning towards 2%, but we haven't committed to that.
And that, I know you have to some extent steps and lanes.
Yes.
We have,
Does that
assumption in- we have an assumption built in for that as well.
Yes, okay.
And it's gone up because we've recently added steps to fire and police contracts as well.
So where do you end up after including that?
It's already in
that 2%? Oh,
No, not in the 2%. It's a separate item within the forecast, though. It's already accounted for.
okay. But when you aggregate those, where are you roughly?
We're still at the 3.5 that we put out there at the last meeting that we had when we talked about the forecast.
Okay. Bernard, is there anything you want to add? Since this is probably my one and only occasion to chair the meeting.
No, you've done such a good job, John. Maybe I'll leave town another time. No, I have nothing to add. I think that this has been a very helpful meeting, at least to me, and we'll go forward.
Great. With that, the meeting draws to a close.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.